Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, Tips and Tricks to Pen Testing, a Layered Security Approach. We're so excited to have so many people here today, and we have a lot to go over on our webinar. So I want to get started, but first, just one quick housekeeping item. You can see on the panel, there's a Q&A section on your screen. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit those through that function, the Q&A function, and we will address questions after the session. We'll get back to you. Also, we will be sending out the recording after the session ends. So feel free, if you need to leave partway through, we will send the whole recording after. So that should be coming to your emails within the next 24 hours. So let's get started by introducing our presenters today. Now, originally we were going to have Michael Skelton, better known as Codingo, on our actual live webinar with us. He is on paternity leave right now, so congratulations to him. He was kind enough to pre-record his section and send it over. So we will get to his section in a bit, but he will not be here live with us, unfortunately, today. But we do have live with us Kaushik, who's our Director of Product Management here at BookCrowd. So how's it going? Give us a little introduction of yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Erica. Hi, everybody. My name is Kaushik Srinivas, and I'm Director of Product Management here at BookCrowd. I've been with the company for a little more than a couple of years now, and I'm responsible for our pen testing offerings. So I'm excited to be here today to talk more about our product, our platform, the services we offer, and then also kind of share address any questions that people might have either online today or later on when questions come in. All right. Well, so thanks everybody again for taking your time today. Congratulations to Codingo for the baby, and we miss him here because of his paternity leave, but at the same time, well-deserved and good that he's taking some time off to spend time with the baby. So agenda for today is we'll talk about why pen tests, why do enterprises and organizations need pen tests, why they use pen tests today. We'll talk about some of the challenges with existing pen testing models in the market, as well as some tips to better address or better see better outcomes with pen testing for your pen testing efforts. We'll also introduce you to the BookCrowd approach of doing pen tests, and then we'll wrap it up with a summary and Q&A. So this is when we say why pen tests, it's almost pretty universal that a lot of companies use pen tests today. We just did a quick recent survey, and more than half of the companies that we spoke to said they did pen testing at least once a quarter. All of the goals and needs for the pen test might be different. Pretty much a lot of enterprises think of a penetration test as something which is standard, which is best practice for making sure that it meets their needs, the needs themselves being different. So when we kind of dug deeper into what the needs were, typically you'll find that a penetration test is run for about 3 different reasons. The first one is compliance. There could be regulatory compliance or even internal compliance sometimes with, say, the regulations such as Sarbanes-Oxley, SOC 2, PCI DSS. And for a lot of other enterprises, it's more about risk reduction. How can I, as an enterprise, reduce the risk of my assets so that my assets are secure? And for some uses, it is a penetration test is typically to ensure coverage and provide visibility to stakeholders. Could be customers, could be third parties, to say that there's at least some baseline of testing, security testing that has already occurred for the assets under investigation here. So again, it depends on the goals, but we see more enterprises running penetration tests more often than not. So given that, almost the paradox is that we're still finding more than half of those customers or companies are still pretty unhappy with their current offerings. More than half of security leaders or the industry say that they're pretty dissatisfied with their current pen tests. So you'll see that there's clearly some disconnect here, where people say that they need a pen test for a variety of reasons, and many of them are using penetration tests today, at least once a quarter. And on the other hand, we find that more than half of the users of penetration tests say that they're not very happy with it. So why is this issue, or why are people seeing this seeing some of these issues today with penetration tests? If you look at the penetration market, or the penetration testing market overall, the market has been around for a while, and for the most part, the existing approaches utilize what we call as a one-size-fits-all approach to penetration testing. And what this means is there are specific ways that penetration tests are done in terms of incentives, in terms of other things that I'll talk about a little bit more, but that might not be the best aligned approach to your goals. Again, going back to the goals that we spoke about, could be compliance, could be for to reduce your risk, or it could be for coverage. So it depends on which of those goals you're trying to address. And you have these levers that you can pull to figure out the best approach for your security testing. So let's talk about each one of these a little bit more. When in a traditional penetration testing model, there's typically a penetration tester bench, meaning the company would have a set of pen testers. Could be 5, could be 100, could be 1,000, but there's always a defined capacity on how many penetration testers the company employs. And what that means is, if you need a pen test tomorrow, it's possible that all the pen testers are utilized somewhere else for a different pen testing engagement. But more importantly, they might not be able to find the best match or the right match for your specific assets and your technology stack, your use case immediately. So that leads to slower time to value. We've heard from customers that sometimes scheduling a pen test with their existing vendor can take up to 2 months. Again, I think that depends on the situation, the vendor, but in general, it's not easy for someone who has a bench of pen testers to turn on and run a pen test quickly. The second, and that's very critical when you say you need a report for an auditor in the next couple of weeks. The second issue with existing models is a pretty inflexible incentive model because it does not incentivize creativity. Let's think about that for a second. So if I had to get my fence painted, which I am in the next couple of weeks, you'll see that it's very hard to pay someone by the hour because there's no way for me to decide how many hours it's going to take for the pen test. So I'd rather pay for the project overall. Again, that's an example of painting a fence, and the use case might be different. It could be for something where I need someone who can be paid by the hour. The point being, there needs to be flexibility in which model you can use when you're trying to run any kind of engagement, and in this case, a pen test. So in the case of traditional penetration testing, it's usually a price per day kind of approach, and that might work great in some situations. But for some situations, you quite likely want researchers and the penetration testers to go above and beyond a methodology, but look at more creative vulnerabilities. Let's say there was a P3 somewhere, P3 vulnerability or P4, which is lower in risk, but that might open more doors into something which is much more critical or severe, like a P1. We call it vulnerability chaining in the crowdsourced security model. So again, that's not something which could be discovered in a methodology-based pay for effort kind of engagement. So that's the inflexible incentive model is another challenge with existing pen test models today. I spoke about the third point a little bit before, but there is no option of talent diversity or varying rules of engagement with other models as well. And what this means is you might want to have a private program for testing your assets, which is typical for most penetration tests. They're usually private. They're run based on some kind of methodology, and they're time-bound or a point in time. Whereas in this case, again, that could change based on those 3 goals, one of those 3 goals that you might have when you're running a pen test. You also need to have the option of rotation of pen testers, because if you're running the same pen test every few weeks or every few months, it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes. Some companies address this by hiring a different pen test firm for every pen test. They might have two that they rotate between, or in some case, they might just go out and find someone new every time. That's great, but with the same company, you still have the challenge of not having a fresh set of eyes, and again, you might not have the option of going to a broader talent pool as needed. And the matching of researchers or pen testers could be an issue as well, where you might not find the best matched talent for your security testing needs as soon as you need someone to test your applications or any asset. The consumption of results once the penetration test is complete is typically not the way many customers would like to consume it. Meaning they're usually point-in-time results, as with most pen tests, but there is no option to do that continuously over time. And there might not be a platform many times for the results to be viewed in real time, as well as ingest those results into different parts of the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, for consumption by the other teams within the company, such as, say, an engineering department, an operations department, infrastructure, what have you, or compliance. So those are kind of the big pieces or big challenges that we see when we look at penetration testing and the way many customers utilize pen tests. Those are the challenges that we see customers telling us about. And they say that if we could solve some of these problems, then it'll make for a much better flexible model, which can be used for security needs, including pen tests. So let's go through a few tips on how you can approach your penetration tests better in identifying a vendor, in looking at the best needs for pen tests, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of those in a second. So first tip is identify your security goals. It's probably obvious by this point, but identify what you're trying to achieve. Are you looking for compliance, maybe PCI DSS, SOC 2, ISO 27001, could be other regulatory reasons as well. Or in many organizations, it could also be internal compliance reasons. Say partners require it, or a third-party marketplace requires that you have a penetration test every 3 months, as an example. And the next piece, or the other thing that someone might want to achieve with a pen test, is risk reduction. In which case, it's probably not compliance that is the top priority. It could be that someone wants to reduce the risk of their assets to make them as secure as possible. Again, they're not mutually exclusive to each other as much as a prioritization of which one is your top priority for running a pen test. And that would determine the incentives that you need for a pen test. And sometimes it could be both. As we said before, coverage is an example where it could be either or, it could be all of the above. So again, think about which of these two which of these two are driving your penetration test needs. And that'll help simplify a lot of the vendor selection criteria, as well as even if you're doing an internal pen test, kind of help identify how you should approach the pen test within your organization. Tip number 2, understand the specifics of your assets. What are you trying to test? Again, we see a lot of organizations across the board. Some of them might have just a couple of assets, a couple of web apps to test, and some are way more complex, could be thousands of applications in large enterprises with different kind of backends, maybe microservices thrown in there as well, depending on the application, mobile, IoT, or desktop thick clients and binaries, and of course, network being pretty common as well. So it's important to understand what kinds of assets you're testing and where they're hosted, because that gives you a better sense of the kind of talent that you need to be looking at. Bear in mind that pretty much, or a lot of vendors that do pen tests would typically support these different cloud environments, as well as these different asset types. even though they might not explicitly say it, because at the end of the day, it's still a web, network, mobile, or one of these different asset types. Doesn't matter what kind of cloud it is, but it's critical. It's pretty important for you to understand your assets a little bit more. So that'll help you have those discussions with with your vendors to figure out whether they can do what you're looking for. And finally, this is pretty key as well, layer the security tooling and approaches based on your needs. In some organizations, it's quite possible that a penetration test every 3 months is sufficient given the velocity at which code is deployed. Whereas in many other organizations with more DevOps style practices or agile development practices, code is deployed much faster, maybe once a day, maybe multiple times a day, which makes a penetration test a point in time in the traditional sense of the word. So you would need to layer on different security tooling and different services even to make sure that you're completely covered in your testing, both from a time perspective as well as in terms of all the assets that you have. And of course, the earlier you can catch something and fix it in the SDLC, the better it is. Studies show that it's about 10 times cheaper to fix a bug, any kind of bug, could be a security bug or otherwise, in a development environment compared to a production environment. However, it's better late than never, so it doesn't matter where you run it. But this is just a quick, let's say, back of the napkin sketch on how you can think about where pen tests fit. So typically, up until I'd say the build server stage, including build server, that's where you typically run your static scans, your software composition analysis. This gives visibility into many different security vulnerabilities. And penetration tests are usually run in like a running application, which needs something past the build server, usually a testing or QA environment, or it could even be production. That's also where, so the testing, QA, and production, those two environments are also where you might have dynamic scans, bug bounties, attack surface management, vulnerability disclosure programs, or WAPs in production, for example, along with pen tests. So again, I'm just showing a few different tools and technologies here. This is not exhaustive, but at the same time, the goal of this here is to show that penetration tests are one piece of the security puzzle, but please make sure that you're thinking of it in context with the broader security goals that you have, and then figuring out how pen tests fit in with everything else that you will need for ensuring that your assets are secure. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the Bugcrowd approach and how we're different and why Bugcrowd pen tests are better than some of the other pen tests that you might do today, or more importantly, how the model is different, or how we're thinking about pen testing is different. With Bugcrowd pen tests, it's a platform-powered pen test as a service. It's faster time to value and offers flexible pen test models integrated into your workflows and processes. So again, let's look at each one of these a little bit more in detail and understand why and how we do it. So with Bugcrowd, a penetration test can be launched in as little as 72 hours. So it's faster time to value. How do we do it? Bugcrowd does not have a bench of pen testers that are staffed for many customer engagements. Instead, we use what's called as our crowd graph and crowd match technologies underneath the hood, which is constantly graphing and mapping the profiles of the researcher community based on self-provided information, as well as linkages that they provide to us through, say, their GitHub and other third-party profiles. And that helps us understand their interests, their skills, and of course, once security researchers are testing assets on our platform, it also provides us a better understanding of their abilities as well as their behaviors on the different assets. So that's the tester side of things. But on the other side is your customer, your assets themselves. So we're also constantly profiling those assets to understand more as you enter a new asset onto the Bugcrowd platform. We would profile it to understand more about the technology stack, for example, of this asset. So a combination of these two now tells us the best possible match in terms of the pen tester for any security engagement that you might have. Again, pen test being one example, it could be something else too. So, and of course, given that we don't have a bench of pen testers, at least theoretically, we have an unlimited supply of researchers that we can utilize for, we can staff for any engagement. So that provides faster time to value for all our customers. The second piece is more around the incentive model. As I said before, you could incentivize a pen tester in different ways depending on what the outcome is. If you want someone to go through a methodology checklist for some kind of baselining, that's great, and that's where you could use something that you could use a pay-for-effort engagement. On the other hand, if you're looking for more critical vulnerabilities or more creative ways of hacking or more creative vulnerabilities that might not be found with a checklist, that's where you can use a pay-for-impact model. Again, so that helps you incentivize for coverage or creativity or both, depending on how the program is structured, how the incentives are structured for the researchers. We spoke about talent diversity in the context of CrowdMatch and CrowdGraph as well, but we also provide different engagement models. Could be small set of researchers or pen testers that are looking at your application. But as you realize that your assets are probably pretty secure, you might want to expand that pool and kind of go broader to get more researchers, get more eyes on your assets. And that helps you be more secure over time because you basically have a more diverse set of talent looking at your assets. And of course, because of the technology powering CrowdGraph, CrowdMatch, and a lot of these programs on Bugcrowd, you also have the option of rotating these pen testers as needed. The results are delivered by the platform in real time, as well as through a PDF report if needed. So you'll see that with Bugcrowd, there is a single platform for pretty much all your security use cases. In this case, we're talking about pen testing. So as the pen test is run, you'll see those results coming in real time on the platform. Of course, the triage team the Bugcrowd triage team will triage those findings before you can accept them and move them into your SDLC. But you still have visibility to them as they start coming in from the researcher submissions. And at the end of the engagement, you can always get a PDF report if you need to share it with your auditors or third parties as needed, as with traditional models. We also see a lot of customers who would like to integrate, excuse me, who would like to integrate the findings with their software development lifecycle. This is maybe with Jira, with ServiceNow, with GitHub issues, so that their developers have the security testing findings in a prioritized list, which they can pick off of and work in maybe as part of their next sprint. So the developers and operations teams now receive feedback within their context, and it's easier for them to consume them and fix those vulnerabilities, which eventually is the goal, making sure that you can remediate those findings as soon as possible. So Bugcrowd, the platform, as well as the operations teams, make sure that you can integrate the crowd into different security use cases, excuse me, and workflows, in this case, pen testing, all within the same platform. So let's take a look at the Bugcrowd platform a little bit more. It's the same platform underneath the hood, but the different products are what we call as the Lego blocks on top of the same platform. So if you look at this, there's the customer console on the one hand, which is where you as a customer would log in to look at your engagement on Bugcrowd, to look at the findings coming in from the security community. And on the other end is a different researcher workbench, which allows researchers to interact with the same platform and get their work done, submit findings, etc. And the Bugcrowd platform itself is a set of core services underneath the hood. We have data services. I spoke about CrowdGraph and CrowdMatch a little bit, as well as a robust set of APIs that helps you integrate into your security workflows and automate a lot of those workflows. We also have people that make sure that you get the best quality of service. And that's what we call as the engineered service operations team. They are a critical part of the platform because they help triage the findings. They make sure that your program is successful. If you were to look at how Bugcrowd works behind the scenes, you'll see a lot of data, a lot of Tableau dashboards, and other reports that we use to look at program health status, look at the engagement of researchers on your program, making sure that your results are high quality as well as that your program is pretty healthy. And on top of all of this are the different products that we offer. There's vulnerability disclosure, there's bug bounty, there's pen test, and you can see that there's a lot more products on top of the same platform. So I spoke about why or the value of running a pen test with Bugcrowd. Well, we also spoke a little bit about how the platform is structured underneath. But let me give you an example of how the service operations team helps drive the platform and also provides a better level of service for you. Bugcrowd is focused on making sure that we can standardize the pen test process. So we do this by instituting certain processes which the service operations team currently delivers to you as the customer. And as we learn more about these processes, they get ingrained into the technology platform over time. Just a couple of examples here. We have pretty stringent quality assurance practices, which allow us to address issues as testing occurs, so that those can be caught earlier in the cycle, so that your the results and the reports are still delivered on time and as per expectations. Our researchers go through extensive certifications, so there's a pretty high bar for pen testers that are staffed on any customer engagement. And finally, we also have performance reviews so that there's a continuous feedback loop so that we can up-level pen testers on the platform or any security expertise on the platform over time. So the quality and the bar of the talent keeps increasing. So we spoke about the platform, we spoke about the service operations team and how the service operations team kind of informs the technology platform. This is a good segue into Codingo, who has some videos that he's done for us here to talk more about his team and how we are in fact operationalizing a lot of these things for our customers today and how customers see a lot of benefit in it.
All right, Bugcrowd pen testing. I'm excited to talk about it because I think we need to do more of that. We've been building this for the past year and we're really putting a lot into it that I think iterates into what we've offered previously and makes quite a strong product offering. And to qualify that statement, first and foremost, what do you expect as a customer? Now, for most customers, a pen test has different drivers to a managed bug bounty program or a VDP, which we still offer and we're still always going to offer. We're diversifying our product line so we can fit different needs. In some cases, a bug bounty is most appropriate because you have a large external asset space and you want to pay for effort. You want to motivate hundreds of individuals to go deep in your assets. If you think about it, what scares you more? You have your credit card and you're told 100 people are going to try and hack you or one person's going to try and hack you. There's a difference there. But that's not always the right fit. For some customers, you want to test in a pre-production environment. Maybe you've got limited credentials to offer. Maybe the report, the deliverable is your primary driver. You need an attestation report or something to satisfy an auditor. And for that, we've driven and we're delivering quite deeply on pen testing. So what we've built, we have the existing crowd model that we use. We have a variety of ways to pair people with skill. So we track the different submissions people submit. We track the history of what they've done for us in the space to know that we're putting the right person on the job. Before that person can do pen testing, however, because there's such a difference in the testing style from bug bounties to pen testing, we put them through a certification process. There's a very rigorous exam at the end there, and not that it's a point of pride, but there is less than a 40% pass rate there, indicating the difference between what you would normally present and what you would see as, you know, our expectation in the market of the quality we want to deliver. Everyone we're putting through here works as a pen tester somewhere or has indicated pen testing experience, but we're trying to not just go via the resume, we're trying to validate and confirm their skill. once they're in that setup too, and they're delivering tests, we're testing them on an ongoing basis. We might put 2 people on an engagement so we can measure the output results against each other and make sure that people are delivering what we want. And then on the delivery side, we've got 2 points of validation. As hunters in our crowd submit findings is going into our existing setup and our existing platform structure we've built at BugCrowd, which means my team, the security operations team, is validating the issues and passing them to you in real time. You don't need to wait for the report delivery at the end. You can start actioning items immediately as they're submitted to the platform, and they've been curated and tested to make sure they're valid. At the end of the engagement, there's also a strong QA process there. We have a dedicated team that will perform a number of checks to make sure that the methodologies we provided were followed, and to make sure that the bar of testing we expected was the desired outcome of that engagement. We also have various processes in place if we put it through QA and we're not confident in that, to make sure that when we deliver a report, we can stand behind it and we're confident in that. Beyond that, in the deliverable side, we recognize that Tracker, the platform we've often presented for bug bounties, isn't the ideal outcome for a pen test. You have different requirements. So we've built reporting outputs that you'll receive, and we've also built attestation letters that you can deliver to your customers to show proof of your testing. And we have different conditions we can put around executive summaries and things like that to make sure that deliverables that you've come to expect from other pen testing providers, we're also operating in the same sandbox, and we can deliver to the same quality and work with you in a partnership with that. But the thing I'm most excited about, I think, in the market is the things that we can provide that others can't provide. And that is that we have this really powerful engine. We have the system CrowdMatch, which looks at the skills and the history people have presented to make sure we put the right person on the job, validated by both their bug bounty activity, their certification activity, and their pen testing activity with us. We make sure that we're pairing engagements to people that can deliver. We also have the ability for Tracker for the tracking of your submissions with various integrations. As opposed to receiving a report, creating your issues in Jira and elsewhere, you could connect Jira to Tracker, have that integration piece, and immediately push with the push of a button your finding from our platform into your external system. So you can manage those pen tests quite effectively, both from the report standpoint where you need to satisfy internal requirements, and from the internal requirement where you need to push to a development team and elsewhere. Because we work in partnership with you with the security operations team, you can also ask questions on your submissions. So traditionally speaking, you'll engage with a single tester in a pen test, and you'll have email, and the engagement ends, they move to the next engagement. In the BugCrowd structure, the findings are being submitted to Tracker where they're engaging with my team, the validation team, and you can say, look, you know, we don't quite understand the remediation steps here, we don't quite understand the impact here, and we can talk with you and expand upon that and help you to really understand the depth of the issue that you're presented with. There's also the ability for you to trigger a retest in the platform. So when you feel you've remediated a finding, with the click of a button, you can call the validation team back in, which has quite a lot of strong pen testers on the team, to come back in, review the fix that you've put in place, and either update you to it not working or update you that it is working, allowing the report to be a more accurate representation at the end of testing of what the environment presents. Outside of those different conditions, there's other strengths that we have here in that we're a full service offering. If you deal with a traditional pen test company, you can only run those types of engagements, and they'll have GRC and other offerings, but with us, you've got 2 types of pen test engagements. You've got CPT, which is a dedicated tester in a fixed engagement to come and do the testing, and NGPT, which is when we can have a series of testers that are paid for the findings that they have. So they're paid for the impact they deliver on that, allowing for a different style of testing tailored to your environment. And then to further support the pen testing that you're doing, we do recommend, and we don't require, but we do recommend that you can set up a bug bounty program or a VDP program to support the continuous testing of that asset over the long haul. If you have a managed bug bounty program, there's incentive there for people to continue to test that asset space as it evolves, as it changes, or as the landscape of technology changes. Often, the things that we would test for and understand today are extremely different to the things we'd test for and look into tomorrow. And knowing that you have a crowd that's staying apprised of that change and regularly testing your environment is a level of assurance that you can't receive if you're only doing an annual pen test, as opposed to a continuous structure. And if you stuck with me this far, thank you very much. I hope that this has answered the high-level questions that you would have. If you have anything more specific, I encourage you to reach out to a sales representative. They're well-equipped to understand this offering. We've been delivering this for a year now as we iterate and improve upon it, and we're reaching the stage now where we feel very confident talking widely about the strengths that we have and how we think we're going to iterate on this in the future. They're going to be able to talk to that with authority and give you all of the information that you require. And with all of that said, have a great day.
The other thing that we touched upon before, but kind of laying it out here, is Bugcrowd has different incentive models and different pen testing models that align with your specific need. Again, we spoke about the concept of regulatory compliance or risk reduction as two goals with pen testing, coverage or security visibility being the third one. But of course, coverage could apply to both of them. So when you were to look, if you had to look at one of these, we've just laid out the different Bugcrowd products almost in a continuum here. The way to look at this graph or this table is first decide right up top whether you're looking at regulatory compliance or risk reduction. And then based on that, we could go through a discovery. We typically will go through a discovery session to discover the best fit product within Bugcrowd for your needs. Suffice to say that it's pretty flexible in terms of the incentives, in terms of the reports that are generated, the pool or the money that you would set aside, what we call as the bounty pool for researchers, as well as the size of the talent pool that you would need. And whether you need this testing to be continuous or a point in time. And we would arrive at a specific product. Again, it's all based on the same platform, but think of them as different flavors of penetration testing that we can offer to you on top of the Bugcrowd platform. Again, Bugcrowd supports a wide variety of asset types and use cases. You could use Bugcrowd for web apps, APIs, could be server or cloud, mobile applications, IoT. And again, just a few examples of the different clouds that we support. But again, I'd say that we're cloud agnostic for the most part. If you have a specific asset that needs to be tested, we can find someone in the crowd who can satisfy your needs and is the best match for your use case and needs. All right, so let's talk about how Bugcrowd penetration tests work underneath the hood. You've looked at the platform, so I think it's at this stage, it's pretty clear how the CrowdMatch technology is useful, CrowdGraph and CrowdMatch, and how the technology is a critical component of the pen test services that we offer, and how that makes the overall pen testing experience a lot better for you, both in terms of the outcomes, as well as during the pen test in terms of consuming those results, making sure they're plugged into your SDLC. Not to mention, before the pen test even begins, we can start off those pen tests much sooner than what most customers are used to so far. With the different pen tests, again, if you're looking for regulatory compliance, we have what's called as a classic pen test or a next generation pen test. In this case, you'll engage with certified assessors or pen testers to test your assets based on compliance-ready methodologies. This methodology or these methodologies are vetted by an external third party, audited by an external third party, and we can share the report as well after this call. It's on our website as well, but it's audited by Schelman, which shows that the methodology is something which will hold up to regulatory standards. So the way the engagement would typically work is we align on the scope with working with you. You could also do it for some products, you could do it in the platform through self-service. For some products, you'll probably have to talk to us to go through the flow. Again, in the case of pen tests, we'll likely have a conversation with you to understand the scope. Once we have the scope, then the platform determines the skills as well as along with your input, determines the skills as well as the pen testers required for the specific engagement. The pen test is then set in motion. We set a launch date for what we call as your program, which is typically the pen test engagement. The pen test is launched, and the specialized security expertise or the researchers start assessing the vulnerabilities in your applications. Again, this can be done continuously, in which case you could run this all year round, or you could do it as a point in time where a set of researchers would come in and go through the methodology one time. Once that is done, of course, the Bugcrowd team is always on the platform behind the scenes, triaging those submissions, making sure those findings are valid so that your team doesn't have to go through that extra step. And we also can make sure that those results coming into you are completely valid and not duplicates. And once the testing ends, there's a report that can be generated and sent to you. This can, of course, this has all the details of the methodology. It has the findings, could be a small attestation report, or it could also be the detailed report, which has all the details of the findings. Again, you can get both these reports along with even an executive summary written by us, or sometimes the researchers, which again is vetted by us, which helps you understand a characterization of the testing at a higher level, which can be shared with, say, the executives in the company or someone else who might not be very security savvy. Again, a few different kinds of reports offered, all of these with the goal that you can use it for reporting with both your team as well as third parties, along with platform integrations built in, which can be used by development and operations and other teams to make sure that the security findings flow through the system pretty easily. We spoke about penetration testing here for the most part, but again, if you go back to the initial goal or initial reason why you might be running a pen test, it might turn out that the reason you're running a pen test is not so much for compliance, but more for ensuring that your assets are secure and you're trying to reduce the risk of your assets. So in that case, it's a great way to do that might be through not a methodology-driven test, but rather incentivizing researchers to find vulnerabilities. And of course, the more critical the vulnerability, the higher the payout is. And that very quickly gets you the most critical and severe findings so that you can prioritize on fixing them first to ensure that your assets are secure. Again, the engagement or the steps are pretty similar. The biggest difference is the incentivization model. One is the penetration testing. Classic pen test, for example, is a pay for effort, which means it's we scope the engagement and we decide what the price would be. Whereas in the case of a bug bounty, we also allow for a separate bounty component, which is used to be paid out to the researchers. So this then allows you to find those critical vulnerabilities sooner. But the program itself is set up pretty similarly. We onboard you. We don't have to do much of the scoping in this case because it's a pay for impact or pay for results model, where you only have to pay out a researcher when you find a vulnerability, when they find a vulnerability, of course, apart from the platform fees and all. So the second piece is, as usual, the crowd is engaged. The crowd sends in submissions, which are then triaged by the Bugcrowd security team. And you can see those results in the Bugcrowd platform in real time. And finally, use workflow automation to integrate those findings into your security workflows. Great. So just to summarize, we spoke about why many enterprises need pen tests. Again, it really depends on your use case and your needs. And there are challenges with traditional penetration testing models, mainly because it uses a one-size-fits-all approach where if your needs are different from what was traditionally considered to be a pen test, then you might want to think about changing some of those levers within a penetration test in order to achieve your goals. So identify your needs, asset details, and use cases. Is it compliance or risk reduction? What type of assets are you testing? And where in the SDLC does the penetration test fit? And based on that, you should choose a platform that can enable those specific penetration testing use cases, of course, but also allow you to expand to other security use cases over time. We spoke about the Bugcrowd platform a little bit and how we can help you address additional use cases over time. We can offer you faster time to launch, ensure that you always have the best matched crowd, the best matched pen testers for your use cases. We can incentivize differently in different models. Again, you could use a traditional model or you could use a different model based on your needs, and we can discover that with you and help you understand a little bit more on what those nuances are. And the platform offers continuous testing as well as integration with SDLC as you may seem fit, as you may deem fit. Is that right? I think so. Cool. So that was all about penetration testing and some of the tips and tricks that you can use in approaching penetration testing as a part of the SDLC and using a layered security approach to ensure that your security goals and needs are met. Again, it depends on the enterprise and the organization and the company, but hopefully this gave you a good overview of how to think about it and what are the levers you can use when you're thinking of running a pen test in the future. Thank you.